It all started in a sleepy Los Angeles coffee shop that had long seen better days. The Silver Spoon Cafe wasn't the kind of place where you'd expect to see a Hollywood A-lister. The paint on the walls was chipped, the tables wobbled with the faintest touch, and the only sound competing with the hiss of the ancient espresso machine was the murmuring of an old jazz record playing on a scratched turntable in the corner. Yet, there he was, Keanu Reeves, sitting quietly in the corner booth. Dressed in a simple black hoodie and jeans, he seemed like just another regular guy nursing a cup of black coffee. What Keanu didn't realize, or perhaps he did, was that his quiet presence was not as anonymous as he might have hoped. Though he wasn't making any effort to stand out, the way he carried himself, his calm aura, and yes, his unmistakable face made him difficult to miss. He'd noticed the occasional double-take from customers walking by but responded with nothing more than a small, knowing smile before returning his focus to the paperback novel he'd brought with him. On the other side of the cafe, a young woman named Tiana was sitting by the window, trying to ignore the storm of anxiety brewing inside her. At 24 years old, Tiana had always believed in the power of persistence and hard work. She'd spent the past 4 years juggling part-time jobs while working on a degree in engineering, dreaming of the day she could help her mom and 2 younger brothers escape the cycle of poverty they'd been stuck in for years. But life had other plans. Her car had broken down earlier that week, leaving her stranded in a city where public transportation often felt more like a suggestion than a solution. Worse, she had just found out she'd missed an interview for a paid internship, the kind of opportunity that could have changed her life, because she hadn't been able to get across town in time. She tried to steady her hands as she scribbled in her notebook, going over numbers, sketching possible solutions to her transportation problem, and scribbling reminders to email the recruiter in hopes of a second chance. But her determination was starting to crack under the weight of frustration and exhaustion. Keanu had noticed Tiana the moment she'd walked in. Not because she was trying to attract attention, far from it. She was dressed in a plain sweatshirt and jeans, her natural curls tucked under a knit cap. But there was something about the way she carried herself, a quiet intensity in her expression, that caught his eye. She reminded him of someone he used to know, a younger version of himself, maybe. Tiana, for her part, had no idea who was sitting just a few feet away. When she finally glanced up from her notebook, her eyes briefly met Keanu's. She quickly looked away, embarrassed to have been caught staring. But the kindness in his expression lingered in her mind. Before she could lose herself in her spiral of negative thoughts again, the barista called her name. Tiana stood to retrieve her drink, an overpriced cappuccino she probably shouldn't have splurged on but desperately needed. In her haste, she accidentally bumped into the edge of Keanu's table, knocking his book and coffee onto the floor. "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry," she exclaimed, horrified at the mess she'd just caused. Keanu looked up at her, his face breaking into a gentle smile. "No harm done," he said, bending down to pick up the book. "Are you okay?" I'm fine," Tiana stammered, blushing furiously. "I'll get some napkins." But before she could dash off to the counter, Keanu held up a hand. "It's just coffee," he said. "Don't worry about it." His calm demeanor took her by surprise. She wasn't used to people being so patient when she made a mistake. Still, she insisted, grabbing a handful of napkins anyway and helping to clean up the spill. As she dabbed at the mess, she noticed the book he'd been reading, Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. The title struck her as odd for a Hollywood actor. Wasn't this guy supposed to be reading scripts or glossy magazines? "I'll buy you another coffee," she offered hesitantly, still feeling guilty. Keanu chuckled softly. "That's kind of you, but it's not necessary," he said. "It seems like you've got enough on your plate." Tiana froze for a moment, startled by how accurately he'd read her. "Is it that obvious?" she muttered, half to herself. Keanu tilted his head, studying her for a moment. "Let's just say I've been there," he replied, his voice warm but tinged with something deeper, an empathy that felt strangely familiar, even though she didn't know him. Something about his tone made Tiana relax a little. She sat down across from him without really thinking about it, the impulse taking her by surprise. "I don't mean to unload on a total stranger," she began awkwardly, "but yeah, it's been a rough week." Keanu didn't say anything right away. He just nodded, giving her the space to continue if she wanted to. And to her own surprise, she did. She told him about her car breaking down, the missed internship interview, and her growing fear that no matter how hard she worked, she might never be able to pull her family out of the hole they were in. When she finally paused to take a breath, Keanu leaned forward slightly, his expression thoughtful. "You know," he said, "I've learned that sometimes the worst setbacks can lead to the best opportunities. It might not feel like it now, but maybe this is just a detour on your way to something better." Tiana raised an eyebrow. "Easy for you to say," she replied, not unkindly. "I'm guessing you don't have to worry about bus schedules or rent checks." Keanu laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "Fair point," he admitted. "But trust me, I've had my share of detours." Before Tiana could ask him what he meant, the barista interrupted them, bringing over a fresh cup of coffee, this one on the house. Keanu thanked her with a smile, then turned back to Tiana. "You remind me of someone I used to know," he said, his tone more serious now. "She was a fighter, too." Tiana wasn't sure how to respond to that, so she simply nodded, unsure of where the conversation was going. Then, out of nowhere, Keanu asked, "Do you believe in serendipity?" Tiana blinked. "Like, fate?" "Something like that," he replied, his eyes twinkling with a mix of mischief and sincerity. Before she could press him further, Keanu reached into his pocket and pulled out a pen. Grabbing a napkin, he quickly scribbled something on it and slid it across the table to her. Tiana stared at the napkin, confused. Written on it was an address, along with a time, 3 p.m. tomorrow. "What's this?" she asked, her brow furrowing. "Let's just say it's a little detour," Keanu said cryptically, finishing the last sip of his coffee. Then he stood, grabbed his book, and with a small wave, walked out of the cafe, leaving Tiana more bewildered than ever. As she sat there staring at the napkin, one thought kept running through her mind: what on earth had just happened? The napkin felt heavier than it should have in Tiana's hand, as though it carried a weight far greater than the ink scribbled on its surface. She turned it over a few times, studying the address and the time Keanu had written, hoping for some kind of clue. But there was nothing else. Just an address that didn't ring any bells and a time, 3 p.m. As the initial shock of the encounter wore off, Tiana's practical side took over. Who was this guy, really? Sure, he looked like Keanu Reeves, but what if he was just some lookalike with a flair for dramatics? And even if he was the real deal, why had he handed her an address? What kind of person does that? Her gut twisted with suspicion. She had read enough cautionary tales online to know that random invitations, even from seemingly kind strangers, didn't always lead to happy endings. But something about the interaction stuck with her. There had been no malice in his tone, no ulterior motives hidden in his demeanor. In fact, if anything, Keanu had seemed genuinely concerned. By the time she left the cafe, her mind was a whirlwind of questions. Should she go? Should she ignore it? Her instincts told her this wasn't some elaborate scam, but even so, it was risky. She debated the napkin's significance the entire way home, her thoughts spiraling as she boarded the bus and trudged up the narrow stairs of her small apartment. Her mom, Regina, was waiting in the kitchen, her tired face lighting up when Tiana walked in. "You're late, baby girl," Regina said, stirring a pot of spaghetti. "You okay?" Tiana hesitated, then forced a smile. "Yeah, just, long day." Her mom didn't press further, but Tiana could tell she wanted to. Still, Regina was exhausted from her double shift at the nursing home, and Tiana didn't have the heart to pile on her own worries. She dropped her bag, kissed her mom on the cheek, and joined her brothers, Andre and Marcus, at the small dining table, pushing the strange encounter to the back of her mind for now. But later that night, as she lay in bed staring at the cracked ceiling, the napkin called to her like a whisper. What if this was important? What if, just what if, this strange encounter could change everything? The next morning, Tiana decided to do some detective work. She typed the address into Google Maps, hoping it might provide a clue about where Keanu had sent her. The location wasn't too far away, but it wasn't a residential area either. It was in a part of town she rarely visited, an industrial district known for its warehouses and small businesses. She tapped on the street view image, but the picture was blurry and unhelpful. All she could make out was a long, nondescript building with a weathered sign she couldn't read. That only deepened the mystery. By noon, she still hadn't decided whether to go. Her logical side screamed no, this was too risky, too strange, too unknown. But there was a small voice inside her, the same voice that had kept her going through all the setbacks, that whispered something different. What if this is the chance you've been waiting for? So at 2 p.m., she found herself standing in front of her mirror, smoothing out her second-hand blazer and jeans, trying to convince herself she wasn't crazy. She had written the address on a piece of paper and tucked it into her pocket, leaving the original napkin on her dresser. If this turned out to be some weird prank, she didn't want to take any chances with fingerprints or evidence. The bus ride to the industrial district felt endless, every stoplight stretching out her nerves a little thinner. She glanced at her phone every few minutes, double-checking the time and the address. By 2:50 p.m., she was standing in front of the building from the street view image. Up close, it was even more unremarkable, a long, gray structure with a faded sign above the door that read, Aurora Workshops. The windows were tinted, and there was no way to see inside. Tiana hesitated on the sidewalk, her heart pounding. She glanced at her phone again, tempted to call someone, anyone, for backup. But who would she even call? Her mom would worry herself sick, and her friends, well, most of them would probably talk her out of this entirely. Taking a deep breath, she stepped toward the door. To her surprise, it was unlocked. She pushed it open cautiously, her eyes scanning the interior. Inside, the space was vast and airy, with exposed beams and industrial lighting casting a warm glow over rows of workbenches and tools. It was nothing like the shady warehouse she'd been imagining. In fact, it looked more like some kind of high-tech creative studio. "Hello?" Tiana called, her voice echoing slightly. For a moment, there was no response. Then a voice answered from somewhere in the back. "You're right on time." She turned, and her jaw nearly dropped. Walking toward her, dressed in the same casual hoodie and jeans, was Keanu Reeves. The real Keanu Reeves. Her brain scrambled for words, but all that came out was a stunned, hi. Keanu smiled warmly, as if her reaction was exactly what he'd expected. "I wasn't sure you'd show up," he said, his tone as casual as if they were old friends meeting for lunch. Tiana blinked. "You didn't exactly leave a lot of details," she said, her voice tinged with disbelief. "What is this place?" Keanu gestured around the room, his expression thoughtful. "This," he said, "is a space for ideas to come to life. A workshop for creators, innovators, people with big dreams but not enough resources to make them happen." Tiana frowned, still trying to piece together what was happening. "Okay, but why am I here?" Keanu's smile widened, and for a moment, she could have sworn there was a spark of mischief in his eyes. "Because," he said simply, "I think you're one of those people." Her breath caught. "What?" "I overheard what you said yesterday," Keanu admitted, his voice softening. "About your car breaking down, about your missed interview. About how hard you're working to change your circumstances. I've been there, Tiana. I know how it feels to hit roadblock after roadblock and wonder if you'll ever get a break. And I know what it's like when someone decides to give you one." Tiana stared at him, her thoughts spinning. "So, what? You're just offering to help me?" Out of the blue. Keanu nodded, his expression earnest. Sometimes, serendipity puts the right people in the right place at the right time. And sometimes, all it takes is a little nudge to change someone's path. Before she could respond, a door in the back of the workshop opened, and an older man stepped out, wiping his hands on a rag. He had a kind face and an air of authority, like someone who had seen a lot and learned even more. "Tiana, meet David," Keanu said. "He runs this place. And he's got an internship waiting for you, if you're interested." Tiana's eyes widened. "An internship? Here." David stepped forward, offering her a warm smile. "Keanu told me you've got a head for problem solving and a heart for hard work. That's exactly what we need around here." Tiana could barely process what was happening. This had to be a dream, or a prank. But the sincerity in their voices, the way both men looked at her as though they truly believed in her, made her realize this was very, very real. And this was only the beginning. Tiana stood frozen in place, her brain working overtime to make sense of what was happening. Just yesterday, she'd been stressing over how to salvage her broken-down life. Now, standing in this sleek workshop with Keanu Reeves and a man she'd never met, she was being offered an opportunity that seemed too good to be true. Her natural skepticism kicked in. "Wait," she said, narrowing her eyes at Keanu. "You heard me talking in the cafe and just decided to help me? Why? People don't do that. Especially famous people." Keanu leaned back slightly, his easy smile never faltering. "You're not wrong. Most people don't. But I've been lucky in my life, Tiana. I've had strangers help me when I needed it most, and I believe in paying that forward. You've got something special, you just need someone to see it and give you a shot." Tiana's mind raced. She couldn't shake the nagging thought that this was some sort of elaborate setup. But what would Keanu Reeves have to gain from tricking her? She glanced at David, hoping for a sign that this was real. David chuckled, sensing her hesitation. "I get it," he said, his voice warm and steady. "This feels a little unconventional. But trust me, this is no prank. I've been running Aurora workshops for 20 years. Keanu's one of our biggest supporters, he helps fund this space so people like you can build their futures. You're here because he believes in you. That's it. No strings attached." Tiana felt her walls starting to crack. The sincerity in their voices, the kindness in their eyes, it was hard to ignore. But still, it was a lot to take in. "And what exactly would this internship involve?" she asked cautiously. David smiled. "We focus on two things here, creativity and solutions. We bring people together, engineers, designers, inventors, problem solvers, and give them the tools to tackle real-world challenges. You'll be working alongside a team of professionals and other interns, learning the ropes and contributing to projects that could make a difference in people's lives." Keanu chimed in, his voice gentle but firm. "Think of it as a chance to do something that matters, Tiana. And a chance to prove to yourself what you're capable of." Tiana's heart clenched. She wanted to believe this was real. She wanted to believe that someone like Keanu Reeves had seen something in her and decided she was worth investing in. But the voice of doubt in her head was loud. What if she wasn't good enough? What if she failed? "You don't have to decide right now," David said, interrupting her thoughts. "Take a day to think about it. Come back tomorrow if you're interested. If not, no hard feelings." "No hard feelings?" Tiana repeated, her voice tinged with disbelief. "You're offering me an internship out of nowhere, and I could just walk away?" Keanu smiled again, his expression soft. "You could. But I don't think you will." The certainty in his voice sent a shiver down her spine. He was looking at her as though he already knew she'd say yes, as though he saw something in her that she couldn't yet see in herself. Before she could respond, Keanu reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, black keychain. It was simple, just a plain leather strap with a silver ring, but there was something oddly significant about the way he handed it to her. "What's this?" Tiana asked, turning it over in her hand. "Call it a token," Keanu said. "A reminder that opportunities don't come around by accident. Sometimes, you've just got to take the leap." Tiana stared at the keychain, her fingers tracing the worn leather. She could feel her walls crumbling, her fear giving way to something else, something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. "Okay," she said finally, her voice quiet but firm. "I'll think about it." David nodded, clearly pleased. "That's all we're asking. Think it over. If you decide to come back, we'll be here." Keanu stepped forward, his expression turning serious for the first time. "Just one thing," he said. "If you do come back, come ready to work. This isn't a handout, Tiana. It's a chance. And what you do with it is up to you." Tiana nodded, her throat tightening. "I understand." With that, Keanu gave her one last encouraging smile, then turned and walked toward the back of the workshop, disappearing through a door marked "Private." David motioned toward the front door. "I'll walk you out," he said, his tone kind but businesslike. As they stepped outside, the late afternoon sun bathed the industrial district in a warm, golden light. Tiana squinted against the glare, clutching the keychain in her hand like a lifeline. "You seem like a smart young woman," David said as they stood on the sidewalk. "And I know this is a lot to process. But if you decide to take this chance, I think you'll surprise yourself. You've got what it takes, I can see it." Tiana didn't know what to say, so she just nodded. David smiled one last time, then stepped back inside, leaving her alone with her thoughts. As she made her way back to the bus stop, Tiana couldn't stop turning the keychain over in her hand. For the first time in a long while, the weight of uncertainty felt less like a burden and more like a challenge. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But for the first time, she felt like she might actually be ready to find out. Tiana barely slept that night. Every time she closed her eyes, her mind would start spinning again, replaying her strange encounter with Keanu Reeves and the offer that seemed too good to be true. She tossed and turned, the soft glow of the street lamp outside her window casting faint shadows on the walls of her tiny room. What if this was her chance? What if this was the break she'd been waiting for? But the more she thought about it, the louder her self-doubt grew. She couldn't help but hear her own voice whispering all the reasons why this might go wrong. What if she wasn't smart enough? What if they realized she didn't belong there? By 3 a.m., Tiana had enough. She got up, grabbed her notebook from her desk, and started writing a pros and cons list, hoping it would help clear her mind. Pros. Potentially life-changing opportunity. A chance to learn and grow. Networking with professionals. Working with Keanu Reeves, seriously, how is that even real? Cons. It's too risky. What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? How do I even get started? She stared at the page for a long time, chewing on the end of her pen. For every con she wrote down, she felt an internal tug reminding her of the pros. The keychain, which she'd set on her nightstand, seemed to glimmer faintly in the dim light, as if urging her to take a leap of faith. The next morning, her mom, Regina, noticed the bags under Tiana's eyes as they sat at the breakfast table. "You didn't sleep much, huh?" she asked, pouring herself a cup of coffee. Tiana hesitated, then shook her head. "No. I've just been thinking about something." Regina raised an eyebrow. "Anything you want to talk about?" Tiana glanced at her mom, torn. She hated to worry her. Ever since Tiana's father had passed away when she was just 12, Regina had done everything in her power to hold the family together. Now, as the oldest, Tiana felt the weight of responsibility to make things better for all of them. But this time, Tiana decided to open up. "I met someone yesterday," she began hesitantly. Regina leaned forward, her curiosity piqued. Oh. Someone special? Not like that, Tiana said quickly, blushing. It's kind of crazy, actually. I bumped into this guy at a cafe, and he overheard me talking about my car breaking down and all the stuff I've been going through. Regina nodded, her brow furrowed in concern. And? Tiana took a deep breath. And he gave me this address to a place where they're offering me an internship. It's a workshop, a space for engineers and designers. They build stuff to solve real-world problems. Regina set her coffee down slowly. And who's this guy? You're sure he's legit? Tiana hesitated. It's going to sound crazy, but it was Keanu Reeves. Like, the Keanu Reeves. Regina blinked, clearly trying to process this. The actor? From the movies? Yeah, Tiana said, feeling a little ridiculous just saying it out loud. He funds this workshop, and he said he sees potential in me. But I don't know, Mom. It feels too good to be true. What if I mess up? What if I can't handle it? Regina leaned back in her chair, studying her daughter with a thoughtful expression. Tiana, let me ask you something. What's the worst thing that happens if you take this chance and fail? Tiana looked down at her hands. I don't know. I guess I'd just be back where I started. And what happens if you don't try at all? Tiana didn't answer. She didn't need to. The silence was enough. Regina reached across the table and took her daughter's hand. Honey, I've seen you push through things that would have made most people give up. I've seen you work 2 jobs, take care of your brothers, and still keep going, no matter how hard it got. If Keanu Reeves sees potential in you, he's not the only one. You've just got to see it in yourself. Tiana felt a lump rise in her throat. Her mom's words carried a weight that hit her straight in the heart. Thanks, Mom, she said softly, squeezing Regina's hand. Now, Regina said, her tone firm, go get dressed and show those people what you're made of. At 2:45 p.m., Tiana stood outside the Aurora Workshops building again, the keychain tucked into her pocket like a lucky charm. This time, she didn't hesitate. She pushed the door open and stepped inside, her stomach twisting with equal parts excitement and nerves. David was waiting for her near the entrance, a knowing smile spreading across his face when he saw her. I had a feeling you'd come back, he said. Tiana smiled nervously. Well, here I am. Good, David said, motioning for her to follow him. Let me show you around. He led her through the workshop, explaining the various projects in progress. There were teams working on everything from solar-powered water purifiers to prosthetic limbs made with 3D printers. The energy in the space was electric, a hum of creativity and collaboration that felt almost contagious. This is what we do, David said as they stopped in front of a team assembling a prototype drone. We solve problems. Big ones, small ones, the kind most people think can't be solved. And we do it together. Tiana felt a spark of excitement growing in her chest. This was the kind of work she'd always dreamed of doing, building something that mattered, something that could change lives. As they continued the tour, Tiana noticed a familiar figure sitting at one of the workbenches, hunched over a stack of blueprints. Keanu Reeves looked up as they approached, his face breaking into a warm smile when he saw her. Tiana, he said, standing to greet her. You made it. Yeah, she said, unable to hide the nervous edge in her voice. I figured, why not? Keanu nodded, his expression encouraging. That's the spirit. You ready to dive in? Tiana hesitated, glancing around at the buzzing workshop. I mean, I don't know where to start. Keanu chuckled. Don't worry. None of us did when we first walked in here. You'll figure it out. David patted her on the shoulder. Come on, let's get you set up. You're officially part of the team now. As Tiana followed him to a workstation, she couldn't help but glance back at Keanu, who gave her a small nod of encouragement. For the first time in a long time, Tiana felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years, a sense of possibility. The first thing Tiana realized about the Aurora workshops was that it wasn't a place for spectators. From the moment David introduced her to the team, she was thrown straight into the action. There were no lengthy onboarding sessions, no gentle hand-holding. Instead, David handed her a thick stack of notes, gestured toward a team of 3 people working on a complex prototype, and said with a grin, "Let's see what you've got." Her team members greeted her warmly but wasted no time diving into their project. There was Elijah, a robotics engineer who spoke in rapid bursts of technical jargon, Priya, a mechanical designer who had an uncanny knack for simplifying complicated concepts, and Matteo, a software developer who spent half his time typing furiously on his laptop and the other half making corny jokes to lighten the mood. The project they were working on was ambitious, to say the least, a compact, affordable water filtration system designed to bring clean drinking water to underserved communities. The concept was simple in theory but devilishly complicated in execution. The team was struggling to solve a design flaw that caused the filter's components to overheat after prolonged use. "Here's where we're stuck," Priya explained, showing Tiana a blueprint on her tablet. "The cooling system can't handle the strain. Every time we think we've fixed it, the prototype overheats again." Tiana frowned, studying the design. "Have you tried?" she started, but stopped herself, unsure if her input would even make sense. "Go ahead," Priya said, encouraging her. "No bad ideas here." "Well," Tiana said hesitantly, "what if you redesign the housing to dissipate heat more effectively? Like, instead of just using internal cooling, the outer casing could act as a heat sink." Priya's eyes widened. "That's actually not a bad idea. Elijah, what do you think?" Elijah scratched his chin, considering it. "It could work," he admitted. "We'd need to run some simulations to see if the materials could handle it, but it's definitely worth exploring." Matteo grinned. "Day 1, and she's already saving the project. I like her." Tiana felt a rush of relief mixed with pride. For the first time, she started to believe that she might actually belong here. By the end of the day, Tiana was exhausted but exhilarated. She'd spent hours poring over blueprints, brainstorming with her team, and running tests on the prototype. It was intense, challenging, and completely outside her comfort zone, and she loved every second of it. As she packed up her things, she noticed Keanu sitting at a nearby workstation, scribbling notes in the margins of a thick manual. He looked up and smiled when he saw her. "How was your first day?" he asked. "Intense," Tiana admitted, laughing softly. "But, good. Really good." Keanu nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You've got a good team. They'll push you, but they'll have your back, too." Tiana hesitated, then said, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why do you do this?" she asked. "I mean, you could just donate money and call it a day. Why get so involved?" Keanu leaned back in his chair, his gaze distant for a moment. "Because I know what it's like to feel stuck," he said quietly. "To feel like the odds are stacked against you, no matter how hard you try. I've been there, Tiana. And I know how much it means to have someone believe in you, even when you don't believe in yourself." Tiana's chest tightened. She could hear the sincerity in his voice, the weight of his own experiences woven into his words. "Besides," Keanu added with a small smile, "I like being part of the process. Watching people like you take an idea and turn it into something real, there's nothing better." Tiana nodded, feeling a newfound respect for the man sitting in front of her. He wasn't just a Hollywood star throwing money at a cause, he was someone who genuinely cared, someone who wanted to make a difference. "Thanks," she said softly. "For believing in me." Keanu's smile widened. "You don't need me to believe in you, Tiana. You just need to believe in yourself." But hey, I'm happy to remind you whenever you forget. Tiana laughed, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. Over the next few weeks, Tiana threw herself into her work at the Aurora workshops. Every day brought new challenges and new opportunities to learn. She worked side by side with her team, contributing ideas, troubleshooting problems, and celebrating small victories along the way. The water filtration project became her main focus, and she quickly proved herself to be an invaluable member of the team. Her idea for the heat-dissipating housing had sparked a new direction for the design, and the team was making steady progress toward a viable solution. But it wasn't just the work that made the experience so meaningful. It was the people. Elijah, Priya, and Matteo became more than just co-workers, they became friends, a support system she hadn't realized how much she needed. And then there was Keanu. True to his word, Keanu wasn't just a figurehead at the workshop. He was a constant presence, offering guidance, asking questions, and occasionally jumping in to help troubleshoot a particularly stubborn problem. He had a way of making everyone feel seen and valued, no matter how small their role might seem. One afternoon, as Tiana was wrapping up a presentation on the team's progress, she noticed Keanu standing at the back of the room, watching her with a proud smile. "You're a natural," he said later as they walked back to her workstation. Tiana shook her head. "I'm just trying not to mess up." Keanu stopped and turned to her, his expression serious. "Tiana, you're not just not messing up. You're thriving. Don't sell yourself short." The weight of his words hit her, and for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that he might be right. But just as things were starting to fall into place, an unexpected twist threatened to derail everything. It happened on a rainy Tuesday, the kind of day where the city felt heavy with an unshakable gloom. Tiana was deep into a brainstorming session with her team, the hum of the workshop fading into the background as they debated materials for the latest prototype. "We could try aluminum," Elijah suggested, his tone doubtful. "But it might not be durable enough for high temperatures." "What about graphene composites?" Tiana offered, leaning over the table to sketch a quick design. Matteo whistled. "Fancy. You're really swinging for the fences now." Before Tiana could reply, her phone buzzed on the table, the vibration cutting through their conversation. She glanced at the screen, expecting a reminder or a message from her mom. Instead, her stomach dropped. It was a number she hadn't seen in years, but she recognized it immediately. Her father. She froze, staring at the phone as if it might explode. The room seemed to close in around her, the cheerful banter of her teammates fading into static. "Tiana?" Priya's voice broke through her haze. "You okay?" She quickly grabbed her phone, silencing the call. "Yeah, sorry. Just, spam, probably." Her teammates seemed to buy the excuse, but Tiana could feel her pulse racing. Her father hadn't called or been a part of her life in years, not since he had walked out on their family when she was 12. He'd been a shadow in her life ever since, a ghost she had learned to live without. So why was he calling now? The rest of the day passed in a blur. Tiana tried to focus on her work, but the missed call nagged at her like an itch she couldn't scratch. By the time she left the workshop, her nerves were frayed, and she felt like she was carrying the weight of two worlds on her shoulders. As she waited for the bus, she stared at her phone, debating whether to call the number back. She didn't owe him anything, she told herself. He'd left. He hadn't cared then, so why should she care now? But just as she was about to put her phone away, it buzzed again. This time, it was a text message. "Tiana. It's me. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I need to talk to you. It's important. Please." Her stomach twisted. Against her better judgment, she typed a reply. "What do you want?" The response came almost immediately. "I'm in trouble. I need your help." Tiana's grip tightened on her phone. Trouble? What kind of trouble? And why was he coming to her, of all people, after everything he'd done, or rather, hadn't done? Her first instinct was to ignore him, to block his number and leave the past where it belonged. But no matter how much she tried to convince herself, a tiny voice in the back of her mind wouldn't let her. What if he's really in danger? What if he needs you? By the time she got home, she'd made up her mind. She would hear him out, just once. She didn't owe him anything, but she needed to know why he'd reached out after all these years. She texted him back, "Where are you?" The next morning, Tiana found herself sitting in a dingy diner on the edge of the city, nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee. She glanced at her watch for the third time, wondering if her father would actually show up, or if this was just another in a long line of his empty promises. But then the door opened, and there he was. He looked older than she remembered, his once sharp features softened by time and hard living. His clothes were worn, his hair streaked with gray, and there was a tension in his movements that spoke of a man who'd spent years running from something, or someone. "Tiana," he said, his voice low and rough as he slid into the seat across from her. She folded her arms, leaning back slightly. "You've got 5 minutes." Her father winced, but he didn't argue. "I know I've got no right to ask you for anything," he began, his hands fidgeting with a paper napkin. "I messed up. I know that. But I'm in a bad spot, Anne. I didn't know who else to turn to." Tiana narrowed her eyes. "What kind of bad spot?" He hesitated, then leaned in closer, lowering his voice. "I owe money. A lot of money. To people who don't mess around." She scoffed, shaking her head. "Seriously? That's why you're here? Because you're in trouble with some shady people and you think I can bail you out?" "It's not like that," he said quickly. "I don't want your money. I need advice. I need help figuring out what to do. They're giving me 48 hours to come up with the cash, or," he trailed off, his meaning clear. Tiana stared at him, a mix of anger and disbelief swirling in her chest. "Why would you think I'd help you after everything you put us through? You left, Dad. You left us with nothing, and now you want me to fix your mess." Her father's shoulders slumped, and for the first time, she saw something in his eyes she hadn't expected: regret. "You're right," he said quietly. "I don't deserve your help. I don't deserve anything. But I'm asking anyway." Tiana opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Her mind was a storm of emotions: anger, hurt, confusion. She had spent years trying to forget him, trying to move forward without the shadow of his absence hanging over her. But now he was here, asking for her help, and she didn't know what to do. "I can't make any promises," she said finally, her voice tight. "But I'll think about it." Her father nodded, his expression a mix of relief and shame. "Thank you, Tiana. That's more than I deserve." As he got up to leave, Tiana stayed in her seat, staring at the untouched plate of pancakes in front of her. She didn't want to feel anything for him, he didn't deserve that. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that this encounter was going to change everything. When Tiana arrived at the Aurora workshops later that day, Keanu was the first to notice something was off. "You okay?" he asked as she walked in, his eyes scanning her face. Tiana hesitated, then sighed. "It's personal." Keanu nodded, his tone gentle. "Sometimes talking about it helps. But no pressure." For a moment, she debated brushing him off. But there was something about Keanu's calm presence that made her feel safe, like she could tell him anything and he wouldn't judge her. "My dad showed up," she said finally. "I haven't seen him in years, and now he's asking for my help. It's complicated." Keanu's expression softened. "That's a lot to deal with," he said. "How are you feeling about it?" "I don't know," Tiana admitted. Part of me wants to tell him to deal with it himself. But another part of me. I don't know, I guess I feel like I owe it to myself to at least hear him out. Keanu nodded thoughtfully. Sometimes, helping someone isn't about what they deserve, it's about what you're willing to give. But it's okay to set boundaries, too. You don't have to carry the weight of someone else's choices. Tiana stared at him, his words hitting her harder than she expected. How do you always know the right thing to say? Keanu chuckled softly. Trust me, I don't. But I've been through enough to know that life's too short to hold on to anger. Do what feels right for you, Tiana. That's all anyone can ask. She nodded, feeling a little lighter. Maybe, just maybe, she could figure this out. But she had no idea that her father's troubles were about to collide with her newfound life in ways she could never have anticipated. For the next 2 days, Tiana tried to focus on her work at the Aurora workshops, but her father's plea lingered in her mind like a storm cloud she couldn't escape. She couldn't help but replay their conversation at the diner, scrutinizing every word and gesture. Was he really sorry for what he'd done, or was this just another one of his manipulative tactics? Her teammates noticed something was off. Priya offered her tea, Elijah cracked even more jokes than usual, and Mateo blasted an upbeat playlist in an attempt to lift the mood in their corner of the workshop. But nothing seemed to break through the fog. Keanu, however, didn't push. He gave Tiana the space to work through whatever she was dealing with, but she could tell he was keeping an eye on her. His quiet presence was oddly comforting, like knowing there was an emergency exit if she needed it. On the second afternoon, as Tiana stared blankly at a prototype diagram on her tablet, Priya leaned over and nudged her arm. Hey, Priya said softly, her voice laced with concern. You've been quiet all day. What's going on? Tiana hesitated, then set the tablet down with a sigh. It's family stuff. My dad came back into my life out of nowhere, and now he's asking for my help. I'm still trying to figure out how I feel about it. Priya's brow furrowed. That sounds heavy. Do you want to talk about it? Tiana shook her head. Thanks, but I think I just need to figure it out on my own. Priya nodded, giving her a reassuring smile. Well, if you ever want to vent, I'm here. And so is the team. You don't have to carry everything by yourself, you know. Tiana managed a small smile. Thanks, Priya. But as much as she appreciated her team's support, she knew this was a decision only she could make. That evening, as she sat in her tiny apartment staring at her father's text messages, Tiana made up her mind. She didn't know if she could trust him, but she couldn't ignore his plea for help either. Whatever his motives were, she needed to see this through, for her own peace of mind, if nothing else. She texted him, "Meet me tomorrow at 10 a.m. at the diner." The next morning, her father was already at the diner when she arrived, sipping a cup of coffee and looking like he hadn't slept in days. "Tiana," he said, standing awkwardly as she slid into the booth across from him. "Let's skip the small talk," Tiana said, her tone brisk. "What exactly do you need from me?" Her father looked down at his hands, his fingers nervously twisting the edge of a napkin. "I owe these guys $15,000, he said quietly. "They're not the kind of people who take IOUs, and if I don't pay up by tonight, they'll come after me." Tiana raised an eyebrow. "And you think I have that kind of money? I'm barely making ends meet myself." "I'm not asking you for the money," he said quickly. "I know you don't have it. But you're smart, Tiana. You've always been the smartest person I've ever known. I was hoping you might have. I don't know, an idea or something." She folded her arms, eyeing him skeptically. "An idea? Like what? A bake sale?" "I'm serious," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "I'm out of options, and I don't know what to do." Tiana leaned back in her seat, letting his words hang in the air. She wanted to stay angry, to hold on to the resentment that had fueled her for years. But looking at him now, so broken and desperate, she realized something she hadn't expected: she didn't hate him anymore. She pitied him. "I can't fix this for you," she said finally. "But I'll try to help you figure something out." Her father's eyes lit up with gratitude. "Thank you, Tiana." "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet," she muttered. "This doesn't mean I forgive you." "I understand," he said, his voice soft. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." Back at the Aurora workshops that afternoon, Tiana pulled Keanu aside during a break, her stomach twisting with nerves. "Can I talk to you for a second?" she asked. "Of course," Keanu said, setting down the toolbox he was carrying. They stepped into a quiet corner of the workshop, and Tiana hesitated, unsure how to begin. "It's about my dad," she said finally. "He's in trouble. He owes money to some dangerous people, and he doesn't know what to do." Keanu nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "That's a tough spot to be in. How can I help?" Tiana blinked, startled by his immediate willingness to get involved. I wasn't asking for help," she said quickly. "I just needed someone to talk to about it." Keanu smiled gently. "Sometimes talking is the first step. But if you need more than that, just say the word." Tiana felt a lump rise in her throat. She hadn't expected him to offer, but she should have known better by now. Keanu had a way of showing up for people, even when they didn't ask. "Thanks," she said softly. "I'll let you know." As she walked back to her workstation, her mind raced. She didn't want to drag Keanu into her family drama, but the truth was, she had no idea how to solve this on her own. That night, as she lay awake in bed, an idea began to take shape in her mind, a wild, risky idea that just might work. But pulling it off would require resources and connections she didn't have. It would require Keanu. Tiana spent the next morning pacing her tiny apartment, going over her idea again and again in her head. On the surface, it felt crazy, something out of a movie rather than real life. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized it might be the only way to help her father without putting herself, or her family, at risk. At exactly 9 a.m., she decided to stop second-guessing herself. Grabbing her bag, she headed out the door and took the bus to the Aurora workshops. She didn't know how Keanu would react to her plan, but she had to try. When she arrived, the workshop was already buzzing with activity. She spotted Keanu near the 3D printers, chatting with David about a prototype. He looked up as she approached, and his expression shifted to concern as soon as he saw her face. "Tiana," he said, excusing himself from David and stepping toward her. "What's going on?" She hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath. "I need your help," she said, her voice steady but tinged with urgency. Keanu gestured toward one of the smaller conference rooms off to the side. "Let's talk," he said simply. Once they were seated, Tiana wasted no time diving into her idea. "My dad owes money to these dangerous people," she began. "And if he doesn't pay them by tonight, things could get ugly. He doesn't have the money, and neither do I, but I've been thinking, maybe we don't need to pay them." Keanu raised an eyebrow, leaning forward. "Go on." Tiana pulled out her notebook and flipped to a page filled with sketches and notes. "These guys, whoever they are, they're not after my dad because they care about him. They're after him because of the money. That's their priority. So, what if we give them something even better than cash?" Keanu's brow furrowed, his expression thoughtful. "Something better than cash? Like what?" Tiana pointed to one of her sketches. "A solution to one of their problems. If they're loan sharks or gangsters, they probably deal with a lot of logistical challenges. Moving money, communicating, staying ahead of law enforcement. What if we built them a tool to make their operations more efficient? Something they'd value more than the $15,000 my dad owes." Keanu's eyes widened slightly. It was a bold idea, borderline audacious. But instead of shutting it down, he nodded slowly. Interesting. You're thinking like an engineer. Desperate times, Tiana said, forcing a nervous smile. Look, I know it's risky, and I'd never suggest helping people like this under normal circumstances. But if it keeps my dad safe, I think it's worth trying. And whatever we build could have safeguards, ways to track it or disable it if they try to use it for anything too dangerous. Keanu leaned back in his chair, studying her carefully. You've put a lot of thought into this. I have, she admitted. But I can't do it alone. I don't have the tools, and I don't have the connections. That's why I need your help. For a long moment, Keanu didn't say anything. Then, finally, he nodded. Okay, he said. I'm in. Tiana blinked, surprised by how quickly he'd agreed. Really? Really, Keanu said, his tone calm but firm. But we need to do this carefully. If we're going to step into this world, even temporarily, we need to protect ourselves, and make sure we don't make things worse for your dad. Tiana nodded, relief flooding through her. I was thinking the same thing. I want to keep this as clean as possible. Keanu tapped his fingers on the table, his mind clearly racing. We'll need to involve David. He has the technical expertise to help us build whatever you're envisioning. And we'll need to set up a meeting with these people to figure out exactly what we're dealing with. Tiana hesitated. Are you sure we should bring David into this? I don't want to drag him into my mess. David's not just a brilliant engineer, Keanu said. He's also one of the most resourceful people I know. If anyone can help us pull this off, it's him. And trust me, he'd want to help. Tiana nodded slowly. Okay. Let's do it. Later that day, Keanu and Tiana explained the situation to David in his office. At first, David looked skeptical. You want to build a piece of tech for loan sharks, he said, his voice laced with disbelief. Not exactly for them, Tiana clarified. More like, leverage. Something that'll make them forget about the debt. David rubbed his temples, sighing. This is definitely not how I imagined my day going. Neither did I, Keanu said with a small smile. But this is about keeping Tiana and her dad safe. And if anyone can figure out how to do that, it's us. David sighed again, but there was a hint of a smile on his face. You're lucky I like a good challenge. Alright, I'm in. Let's figure this out. The three of them spent the next several hours brainstorming ideas. They sketched out concepts for a secure communications device, something that could encrypt messages, track transactions, and scramble signals to avoid detection. It was ambitious, but not impossible, especially with the resources available at the workshop. We'll need at least a few hours to build a prototype, David said as they finalized the design. If we start now, we might be able to finish by early evening. Let's get to work, Keanu said, rolling up his sleeves. Tiana couldn't help but feel a surge of gratitude as she watched the two men dive into the project with her. She had walked into this workshop feeling like an outsider, unsure of her place. Now, she was part of something bigger, a team that believed in her and was willing to help her fight for what mattered. But as the clock ticked closer to the evening deadline, Tiana couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking a tightrope over dangerous waters. This plan might work. Or it might blow up in their faces. The workshop hummed with an almost frantic energy as the clock ticked closer to the deadline. Tiana, Keanu, and David worked shoulder to shoulder, assembling the prototype piece by piece. The secure communications device they were building was a marvel of ingenuity, a sleek, handheld unit capable of encrypting messages in real time, scrambling signals to ensure anonymity, and even tracking conversations covertly. It wasn't just a tool, it was leverage. Something they could offer the loan sharks that would make them see Tiana's father's debt as pocket change in comparison. Careful with that capacitor, David muttered as Tiana soldered a delicate connection on the circuit board. If it overheats, the whole thing could short out. I got it, Tiana replied, her hands steady despite the pressure. Keanu, meanwhile, worked on the casing, carefully assembling the sleek black shell that would house the internal components. He glanced up occasionally, giving Tiana a quiet nod of encouragement. By 6 p.m., the prototype was complete. It sat on the workbench like a piece of futuristic tech ripped straight out of a spy thriller. Tiana couldn't help but feel a surge of pride as she looked at it. They had built something extraordinary in just a few hours, a testament to their skills and teamwork. "All right," David said, leaning back and wiping his hands on a rag. "It's done. Now what's the plan?" Tiana looked at Keanu, her nerves jangling like live wires. "We need to set up a meeting," she said. "With them?" Keanu nodded. "Do you know how to reach them?" "My dad does," Tiana replied. "He said they gave him a burner phone to use. I can call him and tell him we're ready." David frowned. "Are you sure about this, Tiana? These people don't sound like the type to play nice." "I don't have much of a choice," she said quietly. "This is the only way to keep him safe." Keanu placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're not doing this alone. We'll be with you every step of the way." Tiana nodded, grateful for his steady presence. "All right. Let's do this." An hour later, Tiana, Keanu, and David found themselves standing in a dimly lit parking lot on the outskirts of the city. Rain drizzled down in cold, sporadic bursts, soaking the cracked asphalt and adding to the tension that hung in the air. Her father was there, pacing nervously near the edge of the lot. When he saw them arrive, he hurried over, his expression a mix of relief and anxiety. "You brought it?" he asked, glancing at the small black case in Keanu's hand. "We did," Tiana said, her voice sharper than she intended. "But I need you to be straight with me, Dad. Are these people as dangerous as you say they are?" He nodded quickly. "They don't mess around, Tiana. If this doesn't work," he trailed off, the unspoken consequences hanging heavy in the air. Keanu exchanged a glance with David, then stepped forward, his tone calm but firm. "This will work," he said. "But we're not just handing it over. We're making a deal. They let you go, the debt disappears, and they get this. No strings attached." Her father looked skeptical. "They're not exactly the negotiating type." "They will be when they see this," Keanu said, holding up the case. As if on cue, a black SUV pulled into the lot, its headlights slicing through the rain. Tiana's breath caught as two men stepped out, their imposing silhouettes visible even in the dim light. They were dressed in sharp suits, but their eyes were cold, calculating. One of them carried himself with an air of authority, while the other lingered by the car, his hand resting on the door handle as if ready to make a quick getaway. "Tiana," her father whispered nervously, "that's Victor. He's the one in charge." Keanu stepped forward, his calm demeanor unshaken. "Evening, gentlemen," he said, his voice low and steady. Victor's sharp eyes scanned the group before settling on Keanu. "You don't look like the man who owes me money," he said, his tone laced with quiet menace. "I'm not," Keanu replied evenly. "But I am the man with a solution to your problem." Victor raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued despite himself. "Is that so?" Keanu opened the case, revealing the sleek device nestled inside. "This," he said, "is a state-of-the-art communications tool. It encrypts messages, scrambles signals, and makes it virtually impossible for anyone to track your conversations. It's worth far more than the money you're owed, and it's yours, on one condition. You clear his debt." Victor stepped closer, inspecting the device with a skeptical eye. "And why should I trust that this thing works?" David stepped forward, his voice calm but authoritative. "Because I built it," he said. "And I'm more than happy to show you what it can do." For the next few minutes, David demonstrated the device's capabilities, explaining its features with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what he was talking about. Tiana watched Victor's expression shift from skepticism to interest, then finally to something resembling admiration. "This is impressive," Victor admitted, his tone grudging. "But what's stopping me from taking it and keeping the debt?" Keanu's eyes hardened, and for the first time, Tiana saw a flicker of steel beneath his usual calm. "What's stopping you," Keanu said quietly, "is that we'll disable it remotely the second you break our deal. And trust me, you won't be able to fix it without us." Victor's lips curved into a thin smile. "You've got guts, I'll give you that." He turned to Tiana's father, who was trembling like a leaf in the rain. "You're lucky your daughter's smarter than you are," Victor said coldly. "The debt is cleared. But if I ever see you again, there won't be a negotiation." Her father nodded frantically. "Understood. Thank you." Victor turned back to Keanu, his smile fading. "You should keep her close," he said, nodding toward Tiana. "She's got potential." With that, he and his associate climbed back into the SUV and drove off, leaving the parking lot eerily quiet. Tiana let out a shaky breath, the tension draining from her body all at once. Her father turned to her, his face a mix of gratitude and shame. "Tiana, Don't," she said, cutting him off. "Just, don't. Get your life together, Dad. For real this time." He nodded, his shoulders slumping. "I will. I promise." As he walked away into the rain, Tiana turned to Keanu and David, her emotions swirling in a chaotic mess of relief, anger, and exhaustion. "Thank you," she said softly. "For everything." Keanu gave her a small, reassuring smile. "That's what teammates are for." Tiana managed a weak laugh, the weight of the night finally starting to lift. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she felt like she had the strength to face it, thanks to the team who had believed in her when she needed it most. The rain didn't stop as they drove back from the meeting, its steady rhythm on the car roof matching the pounding in Tiana's chest. Keanu sat behind the wheel, his calm presence grounding her, while David was in the back seat, absently fidgeting with his phone. No one said much during the drive. The tension from the encounter with Victor still hung heavy in the air, and though everything had technically gone according to plan, Tiana couldn't shake the lingering unease. Her father's debt was cleared, but the events of the night felt far from over. As they approached her apartment building, Keanu glanced over at her. "You okay?" Tiana hesitated before answering. "I don't know," she admitted. "I should feel relieved, but I don't. It's like there's still something looming over me." Keanu nodded thoughtfully as he pulled the car to a stop in front of her building. "Sometimes when you've been carrying stress for so long, even when it's over, your mind doesn't know how to let it go. Give yourself time." David leaned forward from the back seat. "And don't forget what you accomplished tonight, Tiana. You stood up to people most of us wouldn't even make eye contact with. That's no small thing." Tiana offered a weak smile. "Thanks. I couldn't have done it without you guys." Keanu reached over and gave her shoulder a reassuring squeeze. "We've got your back. Always." Tiana nodded, then climbed out of the car. As she watched them drive away, the weight of everything that had happened finally hit her. She stood there in the rain for a long moment, her mind swirling with emotions, before heading inside to face the quiet of her apartment. The next morning, Tiana woke up to the smell of coffee wafting from the kitchen. She blinked groggily, surprised. Her mom usually worked early shifts and rarely had time to linger at home. She found Regina sitting at the kitchen table, a rare moment of calm in her busy life. A cup of coffee sat steaming in front of her, and she was thumbing through a pile of mail. "Morning, baby girl," Regina said, glancing up with a warm smile. "Morning," Tiana replied, pouring herself a cup of coffee before joining her mom at the table. Regina studied her for a moment, her smile fading slightly. "You look tired. Everything okay?" Tiana hesitated, unsure how much to tell her mom. She didn't want to worry her, especially now that the immediate danger had passed. But she also didn't want to keep everything bottled up. It's been a lot, Tiana admitted finally. Dad showed up again. Regina's expression froze, her eyes narrowing. What does he want this time? Tiana told her everything, the debt, the loan sharks, the risky plan they'd come up with. She left out some of the scarier details, not wanting to burden her mom with the full weight of it. By the time she finished, Regina was shaking her head, her lips pressed into a thin line. That man, she muttered, rubbing her temples. Always bringing trouble into our lives. Tiana reached across the table, taking her mom's hand. It's over now, she said softly. We handled it. He's gone. And I'm not letting him drag us down again. Regina looked at her, a mix of pride and worry in her eyes. You've grown up so much, Tiana, she said. Sometimes I forget how strong you are. But don't forget to take care of yourself, too, okay? You don't always have to be the one holding everything together. Tiana nodded, her throat tightening. I'll try. When she arrived at the Aurora workshops later that day, the atmosphere was buzzing as usual. Her team was already hard at work on the water filtration project, their chatter filling the air as they debated the next steps. Tiana. Matteo called out, waving her over. You're just in time. We're running some new tests, and we need your input. For the first time in days, Tiana felt a flicker of normalcy. She joined her team, diving into the work with a sense of purpose that felt like a balm for her frayed nerves. As the day went on, she began to realize just how much she'd grown in her time at the workshop. A few months ago, she never would have imagined herself contributing to cutting-edge projects or holding her own in high-pressure situations. But now, she felt like she belonged, not just at the workshop, but in her own life. Later that afternoon, as she was reviewing some data, Keanu appeared at her workstation, holding 2 cups of coffee. Thought you could use a pick-me-up, he said, setting one down in front of her. Thanks, she said, smiling up at him. Keanu pulled up a stool, sitting across from her. How are you holding up? Tiana shrugged. Better than I was last night. I think I just needed to get back to work and feel like myself again. Keanu nodded, his expression thoughtful. You know, I've been thinking about something Victor said last night. Tiana raised an eyebrow. What's that? He said you've got potential, Keanu replied. And he's right. You've got a sharp mind, Tiana. You think fast, you adapt to challenges, and you've got the kind of determination most people spend their whole lives searching for. Tiana felt her cheeks flush. Thanks. That means a lot, coming from you. Keanu smiled. I'm serious. I think you've got a big future ahead of you. And if there's anything I can do to help you get there, you just let me know. Tiana looked at him, the sincerity in his eyes hitting her like a warm wave. She'd spent so much of her life fighting to prove herself, to keep her head above water. But here, in this workshop, with this team, she felt something she hadn't felt in years, hope. I'll hold you to that, she said with a grin. Keanu laughed, lifting his coffee cup in a mock toast. Deal. As they returned to their work, Tiana couldn't help but feel a sense of closure. The chaos of the past few days had been overwhelming, but it had also shown her what she was capable of. She wasn't just surviving anymore, she was thriving. And this was only the beginning. The following weeks passed in a blur, but for Tiana, life began to feel like it was finally settling into a rhythm. At the Aurora workshops, her team made major breakthroughs on the water filtration system. They successfully built a prototype that could handle sustained use without overheating, thanks in part to the heat-dissipating housing she had suggested on her very first day. Seeing her ideas take shape and actually work gave her a sense of pride she hadn't felt in years. David had taken to calling her the closer, joking that Tiana had a knack for stepping into tough situations and finding solutions no one else could. Mateo joked that her nickname sounded like a crime drama character, and Priya chimed in with mock suspenseful theme music every time she entered the room. It felt good to laugh again. But while things were looking up at the workshop, Tiana's home life wasn't as neatly resolved. Though her father had kept his promise to stay away after their encounter with Victor, his sudden reappearance had stirred up feelings Tiana thought she had buried long ago. She found herself lying awake at night, wondering if she'd made the right decision by helping him. He'd caused her family so much pain over the years, and she wasn't sure if she could, or should, give him another chance. And yet, a part of her hoped that this time might be different. That maybe, just maybe, her father could change. One afternoon, as Tiana was wrapping up a brainstorming session with her team, David called her into his office. She hesitated as she stepped inside, wondering if she'd done something wrong. But David greeted her with a wide smile and gestured for her to sit. "Relax, you're not in trouble," he said, leaning back in his chair. "That's a relief," Tiana said, though her nerves didn't fully subside. "What's up?" David folded his hands on his desk. "I wanted to talk to you about your future. You've been here for a few months now, and I think it's safe to say you've proven yourself." Tiana blinked, caught off guard. "I'm just trying to keep up with everyone else," she said modestly. David chuckled. "Don't sell yourself short, Tiana. You've done more than just keep up. You've brought fresh ideas to the table, tackled challenges head-on, and earned the respect of everyone here. Including me." Tiana felt her cheeks warm. "Thank you. That means a lot." David leaned forward, his expression turning serious. "I'm telling you this because I think you're ready for the next step. There's a conference coming up in San Francisco, a big one, focused on sustainable engineering and design. Our team's been invited to present our water filtration project, and I want you to be the one to lead the presentation." Tiana's eyes widened. "Me? Lead the presentation?" "You've been instrumental to this project's success," David said. "Who better to represent us? Besides, this could be a great opportunity for you to network and showcase your skills to people in the industry. It might even open doors for you beyond the workshop." Tiana's heart raced. The thought of standing in front of a crowd of experts and presenting their work was both thrilling and terrifying. But deep down, she knew this was a chance she couldn't pass up. "I don't know what to say," she said finally. "Say yes," David replied with a grin. Tiana smiled. "Okay. Yes." "Good," David said, standing and extending his hand. "You're going to do great." As she left his office, Tiana couldn't help but feel a swell of excitement. For the first time in a long time, the future felt full of possibility. Later that evening, as Tiana walked out of the workshop, she found Keanu waiting for her near the entrance, leaning casually against the wall with his arms crossed. "You heard, didn't you?" she asked, unable to hide her grin. "I did," Keanu said, smiling back. "David told me." "Congratulations." "Thanks," Tiana said. "I still can't believe he picked me to lead the presentation." Keanu shrugged. "Why not you? You've earned it." Tiana hesitated, her smile fading slightly. "It's just, a lot. What if I mess up?" "You won't," Keanu said firmly. "How do you know?" "Because I've seen you handle way more pressure than this," he replied. "And you always find a way to come through. This is just another challenge, one you're more than ready for." Tiana felt a warmth spread through her chest. Keanu had a way of making her believe in herself, even when doubt crept in. "Thanks," she said softly. He nodded, his expression turning serious. "You know, moments like this don't just happen. They're the result of every choice you've made, every time you've pushed forward when it felt impossible. You got here because of you, Tiana. Don't forget that." She smiled, feeling a lump rise in her throat. "I won't." As they stood there in the fading light, Tiana realized just how much her life had changed since the day she spilled coffee on Keanu in that cafe. What had started as a chance encounter had turned into something so much bigger, a journey of growth, discovery, and finding her own strength. And yet, it felt like the journey was only just beginning. The night before the conference, Tiana sat at her desk, practicing her presentation in front of a mirror. Her nerves buzzed as she went over her slides, trying to anticipate every possible question the audience might ask. Halfway through her rehearsal, her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at the screen and froze. It was her father. For a moment, she considered ignoring it. But then she sighed and picked up the call. "Hello. Tiana," her father's voice came through, hesitant but steady. I wanted to say thank you. For what you did. I know I don't deserve it, but you saved my life. And I'm trying, I really am. I got a job. It's not much, but it's a start." Tiana's grip on the phone tightened. "That's good to hear," she said cautiously. "I know I've let you down," he continued. "But I want to make things right. For you, for your mom, for your brothers. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I'm going to try to earn it. One day at a time." Tiana's chest ached with a mix of emotions, hope, anger, and a cautious sense of relief. "I hope you mean that," she said finally. "Because I'm not giving you any more chances." "I do," he said. "I promise." After they hung up, Tiana sat in silence for a long moment, staring at the phone in her hand. She didn't know if her father could really change, but for the first time, she felt like there was a glimmer of hope. And for now, that was enough. The next morning, Tiana stepped onto the stage at the conference, her heart pounding as she looked out at the sea of faces in the audience. But as she began her presentation, her nerves melted away. She spoke with confidence and passion, sharing the story of their project and the impact it could have on the world. When she finished, the audience erupted into applause, and for the first time in her life, Tiana felt truly seen. In the crowd, she spotted Keanu and her team, their faces beaming with pride. She smiled back, feeling a swell of gratitude for the people who had believed in her when she needed it most. As she stepped off the stage, she realized something profound: she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving. And she couldn't wait to see where the road ahead would take her. The applause still echoed in Tiana's ears as she stepped off the stage, her heart racing with the thrill of accomplishment. She had done it. The presentation had gone better than she'd dared to hope, and the response from the audience felt almost surreal. David met her as she walked backstage, his grin wide enough to rival the lights overhead. "You crushed it, Tiana," he said, clapping her on the back. "Seriously, that was one of the best presentations I've seen in years. You're going to make waves in this industry." "Thanks," Tiana said, her voice trembling slightly from the adrenaline. "I couldn't have done it without you guys." "Stop being so humble," Priya chimed in, appearing behind David with Mateo and Elijah in tow. "That was all you. We were just the supporting cast." Mateo pretended to wipe away a tear. "Our little engineer is all grown up." Tiana laughed, the tension in her chest finally releasing. Her team had become more than just co-workers, they were her second family. As they walked back toward the conference hall, Keanu appeared, weaving through the crowd with ease despite the number of people who recognized him. He carried himself with his usual understated confidence, but when he reached Tiana, his face lit up with pride. "That," he said, "was incredible." "Thanks," Tiana said, blushing slightly. "You didn't just deliver a presentation," Keanu continued. "You told a story. You made people care. That's what real leaders do." Tiana felt her chest swell with pride. Coming from Keanu, the compliment carried even more weight. Before she could respond, a tall, impeccably dressed woman approached, her sharp eyes focused on Tiana. She looked like someone who lived in boardrooms and on first-class flights, her presence commanding instant attention. "Excuse me," the woman said, holding out a hand. "Tiana Harris, right?" "Yes," Tiana said, shaking her hand hesitantly. "I'm Dr. Leona Carter," the woman said, her tone brisk but warm. "I'm the Director of Global Initiatives for Horizon Innovations. We specialize in funding and scaling sustainable technology projects, and I was very impressed with your presentation. Your team's water filtration system has enormous potential, and I'd like to discuss the possibility of partnering with you to bring it to market." Tiana blinked, momentarily stunned. Horizon Innovations was a giant in the tech world, a company she had read about in engineering magazines but never imagined she'd have any direct connection to. "That's, wow. I don't even know what to say," Tiana stammered. "Say you'll meet with me," Dr. Carter said with a smile. "I think Horizon could be exactly what your team needs to take this project to the next level. Here's my card." She handed Tiana a sleek business card, then turned her attention to David, who had joined the conversation. "I'd love to schedule a meeting with you and your team to discuss next steps. Let me know when you're available." David exchanged a quick glance with Tiana before nodding. "Absolutely. We'll be in touch." As Dr. Carter disappeared back into the crowd, Tiana turned to David, her mind racing. "Did that just happen?" "Oh, it happened," David said with a grin. "This is big, Tiana. Really big." Keanu smiled, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. "This is what happens when you put yourself out there. Opportunities find you." Tiana nodded, her excitement tempered by a sudden wave of nerves. What if we're not ready for something like this? Horizon is huge. What if we can't deliver? David shook his head. "We are ready. This project is solid, and we've got the right team to make it happen. Believe in what you've built, Tiana. And in yourself," Keanu added. Tiana took a deep breath, letting their words sink in. For so long, she had been focused on surviving, on simply making it from one day to the next. But now, she realized, she had the chance to build something lasting, not just for herself, but for the world. "Okay," she said, a small but determined smile spreading across her face. "Let's do this." The following week was a whirlwind of activity. Dr. Carter scheduled a meeting with the Aurora Workshops team, and Tiana worked tirelessly with David and her teammates to prepare. They refined the water filtration system's design, ran additional tests, and compiled data to present to Horizon Innovations. Keanu remained a quiet but constant presence throughout the process, offering advice when needed and always finding the right words to calm Tiana's nerves. On the day of the meeting, Tiana stood in front of the Horizon Innovations boardroom, her team seated behind her as she presented their vision for the water filtration system. The executives listened intently, nodding along as she explained how the device could revolutionize access to clean water in underserved communities. When she finished, the room erupted into applause. "This is exactly the kind of project we want to support," Dr. Carter said, standing to address the group. "With Horizon's resources and your team's ingenuity, I believe we can bring this technology to market within a year." Tiana felt a wave of relief wash over her. They had done it. After the meeting, as her team celebrated in the lobby, Dr. Carter pulled Tiana aside. "You have a bright future ahead of you," Dr. Carter said. "Horizon would love to keep you involved in this project, but we're also interested in you as an individual. If you're ever looking for opportunities beyond the Aurora Workshops, give me a call." Tiana thanked her, her mind racing. It was an incredible offer, but she wasn't ready to make any decisions yet. For now, her heart was with her team and the workshop that had given her a second chance. That evening, as Tiana sat on the roof of her apartment building, watching the city lights flicker in the distance, Keanu joined her, carrying 2 mugs of tea. "You should be celebrating," he said, handing her a mug and sitting beside her. "I am," Tiana said, smiling. "In my own way." Keanu chuckled. "Fair enough. How does it feel, knowing you're about to change the world. Tiana laughed. One water filter at a time. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the weight of the day slowly settling. Thank you, Tiana said finally, her voice soft. For what? Keanu asked, turning to her. For believing in me, she said. For giving me a chance when I didn't even believe in myself. Keanu smiled, his expression warm. You didn't need me to believe in you, Tiana. You've had it in you all along. I just helped you see it. As Tiana looked out at the city skyline, she felt a profound sense of peace. Her journey had been anything but easy, but every twist and turn had brought her here, to a place where she could dream again. And for the first time in her life, she couldn't wait to see what came next. The weeks after the Horizon Innovations meeting were a blur of activity. Tiana and her team were now collaborating with Horizon engineers to refine the water filtration system and prepare it for large-scale production. It felt surreal. Just months ago, she was struggling to fix her car and make ends meet, and now she was part of something that could change lives across the globe. But just as everything seemed to be falling into place, life threw another curveball. It started on a Monday morning when Tiana arrived at the Aurora workshops to find the team gathered around David's desk. Their usual buzz of chatter and laughter was replaced with hushed whispers and furrowed brows. What's going on? Tiana asked, setting down her bag. David glanced up, his expression grim. We've hit a snag, he said, gesturing for her to come closer. On his computer screen was an email from Horizon Innovations. As Tiana scanned the message, her stomach sank. The company's legal team had flagged a potential patent conflict with another organization claiming ownership of a similar water filtration design. Until the issue was resolved, all work on the project would have to be put on hold. What does this mean? Tiana asked, her voice tight. It means we're at a standstill, David replied. If the patent claim holds up, we won't be able to move forward with the project. At least not without a lengthy legal battle, and that could cost us more time and money than we have. Tiana's heart sank. The water filtration system wasn't just a project, it was a symbol of everything she'd worked for, everything her team had built together. The thought of it being derailed over a legal technicality was unbearable. There has to be something we can do, she said, her voice tinged with determination. David sighed. I'll reach out to Horizon's legal team and see what they can dig up, but these things can take months to sort out. For now, we might need to shift focus to other projects. The team dispersed, their usual energy dampened by the news. Tiana stayed behind, staring at the email on David's screen, her mind racing. She refused to accept that this was the end of the road. That evening, Tiana met Keanu at a small cafe near the workshop. She needed to clear her head, and as usual, Keanu had offered to lend an ear. As they sat across from each other, sipping coffee, Tiana recounted the situation, her frustration bubbling to the surface. It feels so unfair, she said. We've worked so hard on this, and now it might all fall apart because of some legal red tape. Keanu listened intently, his expression calm but thoughtful. When she finished, he leaned forward slightly, his voice steady. You've been through worse, Tiana, he said. This is just another challenge, one I know you're capable of overcoming. But how? She asked, her voice tinged with desperation. This isn't something I can solve with an idea or a blueprint. It's out of my hands. Keanu nodded. Maybe it's out of your hands, but that doesn't mean it's out of your control. You're resourceful, Tiana. If there's a way forward, you'll find it. Tiana stared at him, his words sinking in. He was right, she couldn't give up now. This project wasn't just about her or her team, it was about the people who would benefit from their work. If she let it fall apart, she'd regret it for the rest of her life. Okay, she said finally, her voice firm. I'm not giving up. I'll figure something out. Keanu smiled, his eyes filled with pride. That's the Tiana I know. The next day, Tiana dove headfirst into research, determined to uncover anything that could help their case. She combed through patent databases, searched for similar designs, and studied every document she could find related to their project. Hours turned into days, and her efforts began to pay off. Late one night, as she sifted through yet another set of documents, she stumbled across something that made her heart skip a beat. The patent that had been flagged as a conflict was for a filtration system developed over a decade ago by a now-defunct company. While there were some similarities to their design, the older system lacked the key innovations that made their device unique. "This is it," Tiana whispered to herself, her fingers trembling as she highlighted the differences. "This is how we prove it's not the same." The next morning, she presented her findings to David and the team. As she explained the discrepancies between the two designs, David's face lit up. "This is exactly what we needed," he said. "If we can present this to Horizon's legal team, they might be able to challenge the patent claim and get the project back on track." The team sprang into action, compiling a detailed report to send to Horizon. For the first time in days, Tiana felt a flicker of hope. 2 weeks later, the team received the news they'd been waiting for. Horizon's legal team had reviewed their report and agreed that the patent claim was invalid. The water filtration project could move forward. The workshop erupted into cheers as David shared the news, and Tiana found herself surrounded by her teammates, their excitement contagious. "You did it," Priya said, pulling Tiana into a hug. "You saved the project." "We saved it," Tiana corrected, smiling through happy tears. As the celebration died down, Tiana spotted Keanu leaning against a workbench, watching her with a proud smile. She walked over to him, her heart full. "You were right," she said. "There was a way forward. I just had to find it." Keanu nodded, his smile widening. "I never doubted you for a second." Tiana laughed. "You really need to stop being so perfect all the time. It's starting to set unrealistic expectations." Keanu chuckled. "I'll work on that." As they stood there, surrounded by the hum of the workshop and the laughter of her team, Tiana realized how far she'd come. The challenges she'd faced, the setbacks, the doubts, the unexpected twists, had all led her here. And for the first time, she felt truly unstoppable. The following month was a whirlwind of progress. With the patent dispute behind them, the water filtration project surged ahead. Tiana's team, now working alongside Horizon Innovations, pushed the design toward its final stages. Manufacturing prototypes were being tested, supply chain logistics were being mapped out, and initial discussions about deployment in underserved areas had begun. It was everything Tiana had dreamed of, a chance to create something meaningful, to use her skills to make a difference. Yet, as the project neared completion, Tiana found herself facing an unexpected dilemma. It began one quiet evening at the Aurora workshops. Most of the team had already left for the day, but Tiana stayed behind, running some final simulations on the filtration system. She was deep in concentration when David walked in, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Still at it, huh?" he said, handing her a cup. "You know me," Tiana replied with a smile. "I can't stop until I'm sure this thing is perfect." David chuckled. "That's why you're the best." He pulled up a chair and sat across from her, his expression turning serious. "I wanted to talk to you about something." Tiana raised an eyebrow. "That sounds ominous." "It's not," David said quickly. "At least, I don't think it is. But it's big." Tiana set down her coffee, suddenly alert. "What's going on?" David took a deep breath. "Dr. Carter from Horizon reached out to me earlier today. She said they've been really impressed with your work, not just on the water filtration project, but everything you've done here. They think you've got incredible potential, and they want to offer you a full-time position at Horizon Innovations." Tiana's breath caught. "A full-time position?" David nodded. "They want you to join their team as a lead project engineer. It's an amazing opportunity," Tiana. Horizon is one of the biggest players in the industry. If you take this, you'll be working on projects that could change the world. Tiana stared at him, her mind racing. Horizon Innovations. A full-time position. It was the kind of opportunity she'd dreamed about for years, something she never thought would be within her reach. And yet. What about the workshop? She asked quietly. David smiled. The workshop will be fine. We've got a great team here, and we'll keep doing what we've always done. But this isn't about the workshop, it's about you. This is your chance to step onto a bigger stage, to take your career to the next level. You've earned it. Tiana felt a lump rise in her throat. The workshop had become her home, her sanctuary. It was where she'd found her confidence, her purpose, her team. Leaving it behind felt unthinkable. I don't know, she said finally. This place means so much to me. You all mean so much to me. David reached across the table, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Tiana, we'll always be here for you. But this is your moment. Don't let fear hold you back. That night, Tiana couldn't sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the weight of the decision pressing down on her. Horizon Innovations was an incredible opportunity, a chance to work on groundbreaking projects and make a global impact. But leaving the workshop felt like leaving behind a piece of herself. She thought about her teammates, about David, about everything they'd built together. She thought about the challenges they'd faced and overcome, about the laughter and late nights and moments of triumph. And then she thought about Keanu. The next morning, Tiana found herself outside his house. She hadn't planned on coming, but she needed someone who understood her heart as much as her head. Someone who could help her see the bigger picture. Keanu opened the door, surprised but smiling. Tiana, he said. This is a nice surprise. Come in. She stepped inside, her nerves jangling. I'm sorry to drop by unannounced, she said. I needed to talk to you. Anytime, Keanu said, leading her to the living room. They sat on a comfortable couch, and he waited patiently for her to speak. After a moment, Tiana took a deep breath. Horizon Innovations offered me a job, she said. Keanu's face lit up. That's incredible. Congratulations. Yeah, it's amazing, Tiana said, her voice hesitant. But I don't know if I should take it. The workshop means so much to me. It's where I found myself again. I don't know if I'm ready to leave it behind. Keanu nodded, his expression thoughtful. I get it. The workshop is special, it's where you've grown, where you've built something meaningful. But let me ask you this, what's your bigger dream, Tiana? What do you want for your future? Tiana hesitated, his question catching her off guard. I want to make a difference, she said finally. I want to use my skills to help people, to solve problems that matter. And can you do that at Horizon? Keanu asked gently. Yes, Tiana admitted. I could work on projects that reach millions of people. But what if I lose myself in the process? What if I lose what makes me, me? Keanu leaned forward, his voice steady and kind. You won't lose yourself, Tiana. The workshop didn't give you your heart or your passion, that's something you've always had. The workshop just helped you see it. And no matter where you go, that part of you will always be there. Tiana felt tears prick her eyes. What if I fail? Keanu smiled. What if you don't? For a long moment, they sat in silence, the weight of his words settling over her. Finally, Tiana nodded, her resolve hardening. You're right, she said. This is my chance to make an even bigger impact. I have to take it. Keanu smiled, his pride evident. I knew you would. The next day, Tiana gathered her team at the workshop to share her decision. As she explained her reasons for leaving, her voice wavered, but her teammates responded with nothing but love and support. We're going to miss you like crazy, Priya said, pulling her into a tight hug. But we're so proud of you. Don't forget us when you're famous, Matteo added with a grin. David stood off to the side, watching with a bittersweet smile. When the others stepped away, he approached her, his eyes glistening. You're going to do amazing things, Tiana, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Don't ever forget where you started, or who you are. I won't, Tiana promised, her throat tightening. As she packed up her workstation that evening, she felt a mix of sadness and excitement. The workshop had given her so much, friends, purpose, and the courage to believe in herself. Now, it was time to take everything she'd learned and step into the next chapter of her journey. As she walked out the door for the last time, Keanu was waiting for her by his car, leaning casually against the hood. Ready for your next adventure? He asked. Tiana smiled, her heart full. Yeah, she said. I think I am. 6 months later, Tiana stood on the rooftop of a Horizon Innovations building, looking out at the San Francisco skyline. It had been a whirlwind of change since she left the Aurora workshops, and life at Horizon was nothing like she'd imagined, both more challenging and more rewarding than she thought possible. As the lead project engineer, she was now overseeing the final rollout of the water filtration system. In just a few weeks, the devices would be sent to regions in Africa, South Asia, and Latin America, where clean water was desperately needed. It wasn't just a project anymore, it was a reality. The journey hadn't been easy. There were setbacks, long nights, and moments of self-doubt. But every time she questioned herself, she remembered Keanu's words, "You won't lose yourself. You've always had it in you." And he had been right. "Earth to Tiana," a familiar voice called out. She turned to see Priya, Matteo, and David walking toward her, all smiling brightly. Keanu trailed behind them, a paper coffee cup in each hand. "What are you guys doing here?" Tiana asked, her face lighting up. "Surprise!" Priya exclaimed, throwing her arms around Tiana. "You didn't think we'd let you launch this project without us, did you?" Matteo grinned, handing her a tiny plastic trophy that read "Most likely to save the world." "We heard you're kind of a big deal around here now." David stepped forward, his expression warm. "We're proud of you, Tiana. You've taken this further than any of us imagined. And you've proven what we always knew, you're a leader." Tiana felt tears prick her eyes. "You guys didn't have to come all the way here for me." Keanu, who had been quietly standing behind the others, finally stepped forward, handing her a coffee. "Of course we did," he said with a small smile. "This isn't just your victory, Tiana. It's all of ours. But mostly yours." They all gathered around a small table on the rooftop, sharing stories, laughter, and the camaraderie that hadn't dimmed despite the time and distance. For a moment, Tiana felt like she was back at the Aurora workshops, where it had all started. As the sun dipped lower on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Tiana stood and raised her cup. "To the workshop that started it all," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "To my team. And to every person who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." Her friends raised their cups in unison, cheers echoing into the evening air. After the group left, Keanu lingered behind, his hands tucked into his pockets as he stood beside Tiana on the rooftop. "You've come a long way," he said quietly, his voice filled with pride. "So have you," Tiana said, turning to him. "You didn't have to do any of this, you know. Helping me, mentoring me, sticking around. You could have walked away after that first cup of coffee in the cafe." Keanu smiled, the kind that carried years of wisdom. "I didn't do anything you wouldn't have done for someone else. You just needed a little nudge to see what you were capable of." Tiana laughed softly. "A little nudge? You basically flipped my whole life upside down." Keanu chuckled. "Well, sometimes that's what it takes." They stood in silence for a moment, the city lights twinkling below them. "So, what's next for you?" Keanu asked, breaking the quiet. Tiana took a deep breath, her mind already buzzing with ideas. There's still so much to do. More people who need help, more problems to solve. But for now, I'm just going to take it one step at a time. Keanu nodded, his expression thoughtful. That's the best way to do it. As he turned to leave, Tiana called after him. Hey, Keanu. He looked back, his eyebrows raised. Thank you, she said, her voice full of emotion. For everything. Keanu smiled. You don't have to thank me, Tiana. Just keep paying it forward. With that, he disappeared down the rooftop stairs, leaving Tiana alone with her thoughts. She looked out at the skyline once more, her heart full. She had faced her fears, overcome her doubts, and stepped into a life she never thought possible. And now, she was ready for whatever came next. The journey wasn't over. But for the first time, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. What do you think? Tiana's journey was full of unexpected twists, from meeting Keanu Reeves in a cafe to taking a leap into her dream career. Do you think she made the right choice leaving the Aurora workshops for Horizon Innovations? What would you have done in her place, stayed where you felt safe and supported, or taken the risk to step into the unknown? And what about Keanu's role? He offered support, guidance, and opportunities, but he also let Tiana find her own way. Do you think his approach was the right one? Or should he have pushed her harder, or less? Let us know your thoughts. If you were in Tiana's shoes, would you take the leap of faith like she did? What's your what-if moment, the one decision that could change everything? Share your reflections in the comments below.